ARE Podcast, episode number 13.
Welcome to the ARE Podcast. Where it's all about encouraging and inspiring you today so you can fulfill your dream of becoming a licensed architect tomorrow. And now your host, he prefers Star Wars to Star Trek, David Doucette.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the ARE Podcast. And yes, I do prefer Star Wars to Star Trek. Always have. Never been a Trekkie. And the first one I ever saw in the theater was actually Empire Strikes Back. So that's always had a soft spot for me. We're joined today with our co-host, Eric Corey Freed, who I understand is a diehard Trekkie fan. Is that right?
Well, they appeal to different parts of my personality, right? So the Trekkie part is about envisioning a better future for humanity, and Star Wars is just, great story. So it's, it depends on my mood. Although, I have to say that after that, the horrific tragedy that was episodes 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, terrible. Ridiculous.
It's kind of hard to be a Star Wars fan.
And what's funny is, they're just awful. But my boys who are 6 and 8, they prefer the original 3, and I'm not putting my bias on them at all. But they've watched all 6, and they prefer the original 3. They're just that much better, which is just weird when you think about it. They were done 30 some odd years ago. Yeah.
Well, you could say that about a lot of architects too, right? Some of their best work was their early stuff.
Yeah, exactly, right. But you do like Star. If I had to make you pick. If I was threatening to pull all your teeth out if you didn't give me an answer, which one would you say?
Oh, that's tough. Well, Star Trek also, if you think about it, probably has a lot more stuff with, 6 different TV shows and 10 movies, and there's probably just a lot more Star Trek stuff out there, I would think.
Not now that Disney's bought, owns Star Wars. You go to the toy stores, there's Star Wars stuff all over the shelf. It's Star Wars slippers.
I'm not talking about toys. I'm talking about like the actual stories. Although Disney has that.
You still haven't given me an answer.
Probably Star Trek.
Get out! I'm gonna hang up on you right now.
Go ahead.
I knew it. All right, so there we go. All right, so today we got a great topic. We're going to talk about, what do we have? 8 tips to land your first job. And these are exciting. These are actually really good, and it's really practical advice. And a lot of it has to do with just being a good employee, being proactive, and we're going to talk all about that. But before we do, let's jump into our NCARB news. Oop, there's my button.
And now, NCARB News.
All right, there's our new little stinger for NCARB News. And this is from their website. This is actually from September 22nd of last year. But I wanted to mention it today because it's still topical.
Very timely.
Very timely. We are timely here. And it has to do with the NCARB board approving streamlining and overhauling of the Intern Development Program, or IDP. They're basically trying to streamline it. They're trying to reduce the hours. They're trying to make it easier. And so head over there. There's going to be a link in the show notes so you can check this out. But basically, they expect to implement the first phase on or before June 2015. So this is a big deal if you're getting ready for the intern development program or if you're already in it. There's phase 1, which is they're focusing on core requirements. Phase 2 on aligning internship and examination. And I recently did a video with some cool green screen stuff. And a lot of states allow IDP and the ARE to be done concurrently, which is a really cool thing as well. But you're going to want to check out your own state's requirements for that. So just being on top of your IDP is a good thing and will help you with that. So that's our NCARB news.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yes, you can.
Depending on where you live, you may or may not have the option to get licensed in a different state. So, for instance, in Philadelphia is right on the Pennsylvania-New Jersey border.
Right, the state of Philadelphia.
The city of Philadelphia it's right on the Jersey border. So, I was living in Jersey. I was commuting to Philadelphia. It's just across the river, and so this was back in the in the 50s or whatever when I went to school. But I actively looked at what were the IDP requirements for New Jersey versus Pennsylvania, and depending on which one was easier, that was the one I was going to get licensed in first.
Yeah,
and so there, depending on where you live, there's plenty of places where that happens. So I had friends that lived on the New Mexico-Arizona border, and they ended up getting New Mexico first because it was easier. Only California and Florida really make it difficult.
Right.
So it's something to consider in talking about, licensure. Some people just want a license just to say they're licensed.
Right.
And if it's easier in a state that's near you, it's perhaps a possibility.
And as we know, the way this whole process works is NCARB will send our results to whichever state we basically have our paperwork in.
Yeah, you pay them, they'll send them anywhere you want.
Exactly. So yes, check your state requirements, and that's actually one of the first things you should do. All right, so jumping into today's topic, where did it go? There it is. We have 8 tips to land your first job, and I'm excited for these. I've been in this field, it's crazy, I guess almost 25 years. I know you look at me, it doesn't look like that, right?
No, yes.
But I've been an employer, I've hired employees, and I definitely have a couple of biases on how things should be. And some of these things I don't think are old-fashioned. I think they're just sort of good job sort of seeking skills. And you've hired employees over the years as well.
Oh yeah, I've hired a lot of employees. I've unfortunately had to fire employees, and also I still to this day receive about 750 resumes a year. They just keep coming.
Do you really?
Yeah, and I used to be able to respond to all of them, and now I can't. And I keep meaning to go back and even just to send a form letter. I like to send something. So what I do is, once a month or so, I'll go through and I'll try to answer 50 at a time.
Okay.
But I'm still behind.
And okay, so we got 8 tips. Our first one right off the bat is preparing. So what are we talking about there?
Well, this is interesting. I think I think a lot of people they try to find an economy of scale to job hunting. So I've been recipient of resumes that say, "Dear HR department director," or something like that. Don't address it to a general title, and don't address it, especially given that I had a small firm. I didn't have an HR manager; it was me. So do your research beforehand and just find a contact, find an actual name of somebody that's the appropriate contact. Also, know what type of work the firm does. If they do academic buildings and you have no academic experience, well, be prepared to talk about that in your cover letter.
Right.
Better to address it and show that you're professional and responsible.
And jumping on that, just because you don't have that experience, and we are talking about landing your first job, so you might think, well, they specialize in academics, I don't have any of that experience. That's okay. Go ahead and apply, because a lot of what we're going to be talking about today can transfer, especially for the first job. It just transfers across many kinds of building types, many kinds of disciplines, and what many architects are looking for when they hire somebody for their first job. They know they don't have that experience, and they're ready for that.
Yeah, you want to. When we say preparing, I mean prepare. Understand what type of work the firm does.
Yes.
Make a contact with somebody, and remember the type of work they do will also affect their priority. If they're working on prisons, that's a very budget-driven design, building type. If they're working on schools, that's also pretty budget-driven. But if they're working on high-end homes for rich people, that's probably not so budget driven as much as it is detail driven. So that would change how you talk about yourself, how you can contribute to the firm. The key in preparing is not really preparing, you know, yourself, but it really preparing a pitch on why they should hire you instead of anybody else.
Yeah, and we're going to get into this in a second. Actually, so I'm just going to leave what I was about to say. I'll save it. But in terms of preparing, you know, don't send somebody an email who specializes in residential and tell them that you're going to be great. Your commercial background is great, because obviously you haven't done any research on the firm.
Exactly.
You know, so that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you know, it's also interesting because you know, I went through a transition in my firm where we did pretty much all residential to 50-50, and that was part of a, you know, years long strategy of me trying to change the work that we do and how people perceive us. And so I found that, you know, I'd get these letters of people saying how much they love the houses that I've done, and there's no way they would have known this, but it bothered me because I didn't want to be known for the houses. I wanted to be known for the commercial work. But I think if they had paid attention to our Facebook feeds, if they had paid attention to our portfolio pages, they would have seen that there was really this idea that as a firm we were trying to change and reposition ourselves, and they you know, the smart candidates picked up on that.
And also, we want to have our LinkedIn profile up to date, and have a good LinkedIn profile. And keep in mind, we're trying to land our first job. So,
oh my God, so important. LinkedIn, whether you like it or not, it doesn't matter. You need to have a LinkedIn profile, and you need to have a picture of yourself on there. And the great thing about LinkedIn is that it's deliberately professional, right? People aren't sharing, you know, cat photos there. It's the way it's designed is professional. So have a profile, really flesh it out, and when you to talk about yourself, it's really an extension of your resume. So don't just copy and paste your resume on there. This is your opportunity to write it in a narrative showing how you were helpful at whatever job you had.
And also have a good picture. Don't have a selfie. You know, find somebody who's got a good camera, take a few good shots of you, or pay somebody to, you know, give you a good headshot. But yeah, that's your calling card.
One of the things my students do is they'll do a trade, right? They'll find a photography student at school,
right,
and they'll trade some, you know, graphic design or design work for a photography headshot. The other thing in the LinkedIn profile is it's your chance to really expound on results. You don't want to just say, I did this, I did that, but talk about the results. So even if you didn't have an architectural job, let's say you worked at a pancake house, you can still talk very specifically about, you know, I was responsible for managing a staff of 13 waiters,
right,
and a daily till of $500. Whatever it is, the way you talk about your job is actually more important than the job itself.
Yeah, and I think if you can show any sort of leadership or management skills in, like you just said, whatever work you were doing before, that will help. So, okay, that's number one, preparing.
Oh, wait, there's a little more.
Okay, go ahead.
On your LinkedIn profile, ask for testimonials, and remember, professors do count. They have a surprising insight into how you work and how responsible you are. So if you have a good professor that you have a relationship with, ask them. I get asked all the time.
How much do you charge for your testimonials?
I charge it's two cupcakes is the current rate. And then the other thing to mention about social media is that you probably all have an Instagram or Facebook account. Now is a good time to go through it and take down any of those embarrassing photos of you getting drunk at a kegger.
Yes.
At a frat house. Recruiters do look at those things, especially a small firm, especially will look at those things because the culture and the fit is so important. So we want to make sure we're getting somebody who's fun, but not somebody who's got a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
that we need to worry about. So, pictures of you traveling are great. Pictures of you laughing with your friends are great, but pictures of you doing a handstand on a keg are probably not the right type of emotion that you want to convey.
Yeah, I'm glad Facebook wasn't around when I was in college. That's all I'm going to say, and leave it at that. Okay, so that's number one. That's preparing. Number two is the cover letter. And to me, of the list of 8 we have, this is far and above the most important thing to pay attention to here. And this might be my own personal bias. I have a really good story I'll share in a second, but tell me, Eric, why you like the cover letter.
The cover letter is first of all, it's the real chance you have to customize it. I think it's very difficult to customize your resume to every single job. You might have 2 or 3 different resumes depending on the type of position you're seeking, and that's fine. But you're not gonna customize it for every single role. But the cover letter is your chance to do that. Your cover letter is your sales pitch, and like any sales pitch, it should be short. Shorter is actually better. People drone on and on. They they really, it should never be more than a page. In fact, ideally half a page, something quick that can be read. And also, it's not about you. I can't tell you how many cover letters I've read, probably in the 95 percentile, that are some version of this. Oh my God, it would be so great. It would be so great if I worked for you. I would learn so much, and it would help my career so much if I worked for you.
Right.
Please hire me. It's believe it or not, some pathetic version of that. And the response the recruiter is going to get is, who gives a crap what you want?
Right.
The cover letter should only be about why they should hire you. So here's where you can really counteract some of the weaknesses that you might be perceived as having. So if this is your first job, this is your chance to show how you were responsible in other ways.
Yes.
And how you can apply that same thinking to their firm. This is you showing that you can talk intelligently about the practice of architecture and how it works. And so if you're unsure of that, go to one of your professors and say, how's this for a cover letter? Shorter is better. It's also an opportunity for you to show design in another sense, right? Times New Roman font, dead center, is probably not the right approach. The cover letter is your chance to, create a little letterhead for yourself. Do a nice font. Don't be afraid about using gray to black and using bold and unbold to convey information. It's really about a hierarchy of information. You want the cover letter to be punchy, to be short, and to be able to be easily read. And it's amazing how many people will do 10-point, single-space, Times New Roman font. It's hard to read. It doesn't get read. And it ends up not getting you what you want.
I think the most important thing you just said there, and you mentioned it here when we're talking about preparing, is talk a little bit about something in your previous job, right? We're looking for our first architecture job. So like you were saying, you could have been managing a restaurant, 15 waiters underneath you. Take a paragraph, a short paragraph, and talk about that and say, I managed people, I did this, I was responsible for this. That's the kind of stuff they're looking for. And they're not necessarily looking for it if you're the best drafter, if you're the best sort of designer. They want to try and make you fit into sort of what they have going on. And I just think if you can demonstrate you have responsibilities from a previous job, that will certainly help.
Absolutely. And remember, it's also a chance for you to, to show off things that you don't, that they might not know or may not realize. So for instance, if you did work for a job and you help this person write a book, or if this person was famous, even just regionally famous, this is your chance to talk about that. I was one of my first jobs was working for a famous architect. I probably shouldn't say who, and in that job, not only was I doing architecture, but I helped her publish her first book. I helped her set up speeches. I really got to see a lot of how the practice of architecture really is held in terms of marketing and networking and so forth. And so I realized over the years how I was able to get better at talking about that experience. And it really showed that I was more than just a draftsman.
And to be clear, a cover letter, because obviously we submit a lot of things via email. Back in the day when you and I were looking for jobs, it was either through actually, I guess it was snail mail. Usually they didn't want their fax machines tied up with resumes. We had to mail it. But with email, a cover letter is not what you write in your email and say, hey, thanks for, my resume is attached. That is not a cover letter. Okay, I just want to be clear because I would get those, like people, and it wouldn't even be a cover letter. They would just give me a few sentences in the body of the email with the resume attached, like no cover letter at all.
No, the cover letter is
automatically that would go in the trash.
Yeah, the cover letter is not the email. The email should be incredibly short.
Incredibly short.
Please see attached cover letter and resume, and should say something along the lines of, even if you're not hiring now, I'd still would love to come in and show you what I could do for you.
Right.
Again, not making it about me. Don't say I would love an informational interview. Nobody cares about that. But really, that you're willing to come in and show them something that they might not have seen before. So the cover letter is ideally a PDF joined with the resume as one attachment.
Right.
If not, then at least two separate PDFs, the cover letter and the resume. And then this is something I was going to talk about in part 3. But if you have the cover letter as a separate attachment, don't name it coverletter.pdf or coverletter.doc.
Right.
That is the dumbest thing in the world to do, especially given that if someone's looking to hire somebody, they've probably received 100
coverletter.pdf.
Coverletters.pdf. It should be something like hire this guy.pdf. Doucette's incredible coverletter.pdf. It could, you could have a lot of fun with the title, and again, it's an opportunity to show your creativity and a little bit of your personality.
Yeah, I like the last name in there. That's a good one. So here's my cover letter story, and I got my first architecture job because of my cover letter. And so I was, maybe 21 years old. I went to Wentworth for a couple of years in Boston, and then transferred to the Boston Architectural Center, which is now called College, which you get to advise. You just got back from there, actually, last week. You were at the
Just
BAC.
got back teaching there for a week, yeah.
And this was in early 90s. It was a tough job market. And the BAC has a list of job opportunities because architects in Boston know BAC students know how to work, so they like BAC students. So part of what we do is we work at a real job during the day and go to school at night on the weekends. So the first job I got, it was incredibly difficult, but I got a job working for the federal government at the Thomas Tip O'Neill building down by Boston Garden. And I worked there for a year. It was the General Services Administration, and it was their sort of real estate branch. And so I did that for a year. We were on DataCAD back in those days. Yeah. So I got so after a year of getting that experience, then I got an interview from Lee Hohenshaw, who was a firm owner in Boston, right at Downtown Crossing, and he did a lot of TI improvements, very business oriented architect. He had about 15 people work for him. So he called me in, and I remember this like it was yesterday. We sit down, and he said flat out, the reason why I called you in for the interview was because of your cover letter. And he said, you wouldn't believe the amount of people who can't write a good cover letter. So, yeah. And I remember sitting in his office just like yesterday. So the whole reason I even got this, it wasn't about my resume, because my resume was thin. It was the fact that I wrote a decent cover letter, and it was probably 3 paragraphs. And he identified with that. So I never, ever forgot that. And that's what got me my first real job. It was the cover letter. It wasn't the resume. And since hiring employees over the years and looking to hire, I now know what he was talking about. I would say less than 10% of the resumes that I have received over the years have had decent cover letters. Most of them are just terrible. They are just terrible. And I usually will not look, unless the resume was stellar, I'd be like, no, you can't write a cover letter, next. Because there's a lot of good people who can write cover letters, you just got to find them.
I will also say that it's a good time to name drop. So if the cover letter says, Dave Doucette said, suggested I contact you.
Right.
Then I'm gonna give it more time than I would if I'd never heard of this person and I didn't know their connection to me. So it is okay to name drop in the cover letter, especially if it's genuine. Make sure, of course, you tell Dave Doucette that you're mentioning his name.
Right.
That always helps. And also the cover letter doesn't need to have boilerplate. You don't need to include references available upon request. Of course, references are available for everybody upon request. So is a ham sandwich. Anything you want is available upon request. So you can skip all those pleasantries and just get right into the meat of it. 3 paragraphs. Boom, boom, boom. Here's who I am. Here's what I can do for you. And 3rd paragraph is really the call to action. let me come in and show you, how I could be a perfect fit for your firm. Put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
They want to find somebody who fits in with their personality and with their staff's personality. Someone that really
who's responsible.
who's responsible.
Who's responsible.
And could pick up things quickly. Nobody's
Yes.
expecting you to know everything, especially in your first job.
Yeah.
If anything, we just want to make sure that you're not going to be a weirdo or a flake.
Yeah, and Lee had they had this program at the time called ArisCAD, and nobody knew ArisCAD. So obviously he knew he was going to have to train somebody on ArisCAD. So so I had DataCAD experience, so he hired me anyway. But it was, I think, because of it was because of the cover letter, and then we had a good interview. So that's the cover letter, and to me that is the most important thing, because if you don't have a good cover letter, you're not going to get the interview.
No.
And without the interview, you're not getting the job. So yeah, cover letter is your chance to shine. Highlight sort of any responsibility that you've had, because we're looking for responsible people who can write well, which, by the way, architects, I found this out when I was at Wentworth, generally can't write very good. And I noticed this with my roommates in the papers we would do, and I'd be like, how'd you graduate high school? Like, this is terrible.
Yeah.
But generally architects cannot write well.
No.
And I think a well-written cover letter displays that you can write well, and don't underestimate that either, because there's a lot of poorly written cover letters.
Let's move on to number 3, because I think we're going to cover a lot of the same ground.
Okay, I think cover letter should have been its own episode here. I don't know who's coming up with this.
Maybe it will be in the future.
All right, so number 3 is resume. What do you got there?
So the resume, my advice might surprise a lot of you, and the advice is the resume is your opportunity to show how you're different, not how you're the same. Right? Don't use one of the Microsoft Word templates that everybody's seen in Times New Roman font. It's really something for you to design. Now, there are templates available you can buy that are beautiful and well done, and that's fine. But really, you're not trying to fit in here. You're trying to stand out. So with the resume, don't make it look like everybody else. On the other hand, don't make it this weird abstract, treatise about graphic design. It needs to be easy to read. It needs to really convey information. So if anything, it is a design exercise about information design. Now, the other thing is that most people do not realize is that most resumes are looked at for about 9 to 15 seconds. And recruiters call this the 9-second rule. And so your resume has to work being scanned in 9 seconds and, of course, being scrutinized thoroughly. The 9-second rule is brutal, because it means that if I'm just looking at something, I just almost have to get an evocative glimpse. So that means that the information needs to be laid out in a hierarchical way. So if you want to show off the company name, then maybe that's a couple points bigger. If you want to show off your title instead, maybe that's the thing that's bigger and bold. Maybe in the description, the text is a dark gray, and then there's certain things that are black and bolded. So that way things start to pop off the surface of the page. This 9-second rule is critical. Most young people don't believe me when I tell them this, but it's true. So you want to kind of look through those eyes of how does this hold up if just being scanned.
I mean, I agree. I think I come from the background of, I think a resume just needs to be simple. I don't want to see a bunch of fancy stuff on it. I don't want to see Joe Designer have all these graphics on it. Right. I just want to be able to look at it and read it. And if I'm looking at the resume as if I was hiring, I already know I have a good cover letter. Because if I don't have a good cover letter, I'm really not looking at the resume. I might just take a look at it to see, oh yeah, the resume sucks, and I can tell because the cover letter did, but I won't really consider it. I think the resume has got to be one page. I'm a big believer in that, and especially we're talking about looking for your first job. There's no reason to have a 2-page resume.
No, not for your first job.
No,
definitely not.
Definitely not.
My resume is 3 pages now. I hate that it's 3 pages, but I've got 25 years of experience.
Yeah, but you got to edit it down 1 page. I will not look at a 3-page resume.
but I will say this, that I've designed my 3-pager that the first page could be the standalone page. So
Yeah.
the first page to me is my overview of my career, which kind of brings me to another point. Your resume is not your autobiography. It is a sales pitch. You do not need to include every single thing on there.
Well, yeah, you don't need all the classes you've taken.
No.
I think
don't fill space. Don't put stuff on there just to fill space. Remember, it is a sales pitch. The entire goal of the resume is to get you an interview. So it's a sales pitch of why you must hire me.
Right,
not somebody else.
That's what the resume is. It's to get you the interview. That's what the cover letter of the resume is. It's not going to get you the job, but we want it to get you the interview. Because if you can get in front of somebody, then you can hopefully sell them on why they should pick you. I will say with the resume, because we're talking about your first job, you don't need to list all the design classes you took. You don't need to list all the design studios. Employers don't care. If I'm looking at a resume, I know I'm hiring somebody, this is their first job, or I have a very entry-level position. Here's what I'm looking for in the resume. What's your work history? How long have you been there? Okay, you were at this restaurant for 3 years. You managed 15 waiters. That person I'm going to call in for an interview because I know they're responsible. I can teach them whatever we need to teach them to work them into the firm. But I see responsibility there, and they can convey it clearly, right? They have a good cover letter, so now I'm on the resume. I don't care you don't have architectural work in an architectural office experience. This is a first job. I understand that. But if you can demonstrate responsibility, if I look at your resume and you've had 10 different jobs in the last 2 years, that's not good. I want somebody who can hold a job. I want somebody with responsibility.
I will also say that don't list all your classes, considering that everyone else applying probably took the same classes.
Yeah.
The only caveat would be if Santiago Calatrava himself taught you structures class and he was your professor, then yeah, you might want to mention that. That's pretty impressive. I
guess.
But otherwise, no need.
I guess in terms of classes to list that are important, whatever sort of computer skills, they might be looking for, or if that particular firm is looking in the job description for a particular skill, Revit or whatever the program might be, obviously we want to make sure we list that.
Right. One thing that I have my students do, because I actually ask them all to submit their resumes so I can give them advice, is instead of putting in more text, that potentially you could use little graphic icons for the apps. So put in the AutoCAD icon, the Illustrator icon, the Photoshop icon. It's a fun way to make it more graphical, to convey the information without all the text.
It already sounds too busy to me.
Oh, you're such a purist.
I'm old school.
But also the other thing to keep in mind is that if you're at all looking at a big firm, they probably use a resume service, meaning they post a job,
right,
and you're uploading the file. The file is getting analyzed by a machine. So standard search engine optimization, SEO rules apply. The machine is reading your resume before a human does, and it's looking for keywords. So that means that you might want to go through and look at your resume again and see what words you might want to add in that are written on job descriptions.
Yeah, but are they really doing that for somebody looking for their first job?
I've had 3 different HR people at large firms. These are firms that all of you have heard of. I can't say the names, but they have a lot of initials, right?
You like to say that. I can't tell you who.
I don't know. I mean,
I know it's fine.
I don't want to get sued. That's all. But I'd love to tell you. I hate keeping secrets. But they're these 3 large firms, and they said to me, "Oh yeah, we have this service. I forget what it's called now. We have this service. It scans the resume, and its job is to reject resumes. So if you don't have the keywords in a certain number and a certain frequency, I won't even get to a human being. That means human eyes won't even get to see your resume,
right, if
you don't have the right search terms in there."
Yeah, I just have to think that is more in the minority than in the majority of how things are done. It's a valid point.
You're applying to a 5-person firm, they're probably those are humans doing it. But you're applying to, let's say, Gensler, right, with what, 80 offices or whatever they have?
Right.
A human being's not going through that first. It's going through the machines first.
Yeah, it's a valid point, the SEO thing. For me, I just want a clean resume, Just if it's clean, well written, no typos. Do not have. I would see resumes with typos on it or cover letters with typos immediately in the trash.
Immediate rejection.
Yeah, you do not have it.
Not just typos, but confusing there apostrophe re
Yeah.
versus there EIR.
Yeah.
Immediate rejection.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't, and that's not being a jerk. That's if something is scrutinized as a resume didn't get checked like that, how are you going to do it on a set of drawings?
Well, and it's also too, as an employer, we're looking for the good resumes, but we get a bunch in. We're looking for any reason to just throw them out, so we don't have to further consider that one. That's kind of what we're looking at too, because we need to whittle it down. So, well, how can we whittle it down? Well, typo. There you go. I'm whittling it down. Because it's this hard stuff. So okay, that's resume. Number 4 is getting.
Wait.
Go.
One more thing to add for the resume is that you want to quantify everything, and this is actually a key thing. So instead of saying, even if it was a non-architectural job, but instead of saying responsible for all aspects of the drawing set, that doesn't mean anything to me. Instead, it's much better to say, did all of the drawings for a 20-page drawing set for a $1.2 million house.
Right.
In a 6-month time period. You've now quantified everything, the amounts, the budgets, and suddenly that is, first of all, it's much more relatable to me and my needs.
Right.
But it also shows that there's a certain level of seriousness about your work.
I've always done that. I worked on a hotel project, this value, whatever it is. But I'm thinking, and you mentioned this earlier, again, we're talking first job, your manager at a restaurant, like you said, tell us how much money you're managing or how much the restaurant is something, because it just sounds really good. Like I was responsible, we were managing, $3,000 a day, whatever it is. But that just sounds good. And that shows a level of seriousness in you because you're describing this. I really like that.
If you can't quantify it, then consider taking it off your resume entirely, because then it's not adding anything, right? It's not an autobiography. It's a sales pitch. So if it's a job that you enjoyed, great, but if it doesn't add to the quantity, and remember, quantifying could be something as, grew their social media presence to 12,000 subscribers in a 3-month period. I mean, it could be whatever you did, just show your results.
And even I'm just thinking, like, let's say you're working at a movie theater, tell me how many, like if you were in the stand, in the concessions or what, how much concessions were being done, like whatever, just sort of awareness of, I think you're like be specific. Like I worked at a movie theater, we handled this much money or this many people came through, whatever it is. I like that. Okay. Okay, there we go. Are you done on resume now?
Yes.
All right, number 4 is getting the interview, and this actually is probably the hardest part in all of this. It's getting in front of somebody. I mean, it's like an actor trying to get the audition. That's what we're really trying to do. We're trying to put our best foot forward through a cover letter and a resume. Neither a cover letter or resume is going to get us the job. They're just going to get us the interview, and that's what we want at this point. So what do we have for number 4, getting an interview? Well,
with the interview, you've sent off your cover letter, your resume. Your cover letter and resume are not named coverletter.pdf and resume.pdf, right? You sent it to a real human being. You have a good cover letter, and your resume doesn't have typos. You've done all that, great. So now wait, I'm sorry. And you don't want to come off arrogant. I forgot to mention that. You don't want to sound like you're going to save the world because that, or that you're the best, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, because you're not. Especially if this is your first job in architecture. But you want to get the interview. Do not, and I repeat, do not show up at the office unannounced. I know some of you might be thinking, I would never do such a thing, but I can't tell you how many times this has happened. Are you serious? Oh, yeah. We had people show up. We had this one guy. First of all, he was a very creepy looking guy to begin with. Right. He was very sweaty and nervous. And he had this shaky plate of cupcakes that he'd hand baked. And he showed up and he said, I sent you a resume yesterday. First of all, yesterday. I probably haven't even opened the email yet. Right. And here I made you these cupcakes. Well, everybody in the staff was terrified to even
Yeah. Did anybody eat the cupcake?
Nobody was going to eat those cupcakes. They could have roofies in them for all we know, right? So we had to throw them away. We couldn't even get them to homeless people. That's how scared we were of these cupcakes. Don't show up unannounced. First of all, you're creating problems. It's real annoyance. People generally feel bad if they can't accommodate you. You're making them feel bad by showing up unannounced.
Right.
If you want to drop by the office to see it, then you email them with a follow-up. And the follow-up is your opportunity to touch them again. So for instance, instead of saying, hey, when are you going to look at my resume, which is barking orders at them, instead say to them, I saw this recent article about one of your projects, and I have some ideas of how you can get more press like this. Or I saw this recent article using this technology. I saw that you used it in one of your projects. Let's meet up to talk about it. You're looking for an excuse to want them to chat with you, not to creep them out and scare them.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely don't show up unannounced. What else here? How can we get the interview? LinkedIn?
Well, you can connect on LinkedIn. In the connection of LinkedIn, when you do it, don't just go with the default text. It's fine for you to say, send a resume for the current position you have open. Would love the chance to show you what I can do with it. Again, I'm not making it about myself. I'm not saying, please give me the job. I'm saying, let me show you what I can do. Let me show you why you need to hire me. So that's how you connect on LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure that you'd have a surprising acceptance rate if you do it the right way by connecting on LinkedIn with a proper note. And the note again should be as short as possible. And
we're certainly not connecting on Facebook, correct?
No. Facebook is for friends.
Right.
I would only connect on Facebook if they said connect with me on Facebook.
And
you should, however, like the company if they have a Facebook page.
Okay.
You can like the company page and get their updates. But
after the interview, I shouldn't go home, and try and friend request the guy who just interviewed me.
No. There's no good will come of that. You can offer to take them to coffee. You can ask. You can, look for a mentor. Tell them you're looking for a mentor and you'd love to talk to them about it. Whether it's for an IDP proper mentorship or just a guidance mentor, that's fine. But these should be done through email, ideally. If you want to do a phone call, that's fine, but a phone call is very aggressive.
Phone calls aggressive.
They're on the phone all day.
And here's the thing with this getting the interview, I think, is a little tricky because I get people, every once in a while I'll get a few resumes in email to me, and then I get the follow-up call a couple days later. Now, keep in mind, there's no job announcement. I haven't announced anything. So I don't expect resumes to come in. So then they come in, and then I get a call a couple days later. It's sort of, I appreciate somebody trying to be on it, but to me, it's just annoying. Yes. It's like I'm not asking for it. So I find the calling annoying.
There's a real difference between us having a job posting that's out and we're actively looking to fill an opening versus you just sending a resume because you want to and then following up with me. That's not a follow-up. That's a stalker.
That's a stalker. And frankly, I just don't think anything good is going to come of sort of you phoning or trying to sort of be pushy. If you have a good cover letter and you have a good resume, you'll get the interview. So number 4, it's a little tricky. Like you want to be proactive, right? But in the same token, we don't want to overdo it because then we come across too pushy and stalker.
One of the best follow-ups I ever received, they connected with me on LinkedIn. They sent an email 2 days after they sent the resume, so they gave me time to actually look at it. I hadn't yet, but they gave me time anyway. And they said in the email, hey, are you going to go to that lecture on Thursday night? If so, I'd love to take you to coffee afterwards.
Right.
So first of all, they're showing me that they're connected in the community. They're actively going.
Right.
The lecture looked great. It was on green building, something or other, or who knows what. And so I ended up going. I ended up having coffee with them afterwards. It was great. And I ended up hiring them.
Did you really?
Yes.
Wow.
And I probably shouldn't say who.
Okay.
But she if she's listening, she knows who she is. But it was an event at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco, and she said, let's go have coffee afterwards. And I did. And she was very impressive in person.
And number 5, nailing the interview. This is tricky. This is tricky, and I'll tell you, based on my experience, I think early on, I went on a lot of job interviews. I've been on a lot of job interviews over the years. It's a skill. It's an art, and listening is important. Don't cut people off when they're in the middle of talking. But why don't you start us off with number 5, nailing the interview? So
I want to preface this by saying I don't want to freak you guys out. I don't want my tips to make you more nervous, but there are a lot of tips here that I want you to listen to. First of all, congratulations, right? You should feel good about yourself that you got the interview. That means something. That means that out of the hundreds of possible resumes that they received, they picked you. And remember, they're probably realistically only interviewing at most 4 people.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Yeah.
Right? It's not like they're not interviewing 50 people for this. So if anything, maybe they did phone interviews, but that was probably only at most 8 people. And then an in-person interview at most 4, ideally 3. So when you show up, don't show up half an hour early. First of all, it's rude. And you don't want to show up late. The magic number is you want to walk in 5 minutes before the allotted time. 5 to 10. If you arrive early, don't go up to the office.
Exactly.
Wait outside, walk around, go walk around the block, work out the nerves. But when people show up half an hour early for an interview, you're not showing me that you're on it. It's showing me that you're not respectful of everybody else's time.
That's exactly it. You're not listening. You're not respectful, because a lot of offices are small. There may or may not even be a waiting room. So it's going to be awkward for you to sit there for 20 or stand. I mean, there might not even be chairs to sit in. It's just awkward.
Well, not only that, usually I'll schedule the interviews all in one day, back to back.
Right.
So you show up half an hour early, you're going to see your competition walking out and me slapping their back and shaking their hand. It's only going to psych you out. It's only going to make it awkward for everybody. It's plus the worst thing ever is I'm sitting there and then one of the other staff says, "Oh, your 11 o'clock is here at
10:30, right?
At 10:30 already."
Right. And
tell them to wait. And now I'm feeling pressure. Remember, I'm a human being just like anybody else. So suddenly I'm having this pressure. So your sweet spot is 5 to 10 minutes early. No more than that, and certainly no later.
Yeah, I think 10's pushing. I think 5 is perfect. And I'll say and I've had people show up to my interviews early, and right off the bat, I'm thinking negative in the sense that this person can't follow directions.
Right.
And we want somebody who's going to follow directions. And they're showing me that they can't follow directions. They haven't even said anything yet. We haven't even started the interview yet, but they're there a half hour early. So good point.
So remember now, at the interview, they thought that you could do the job. They had it. Obviously, you wouldn't be there if they didn't think you could do the job. So
right.
your role in this interview is to connect with them, because everybody they're interviewing probably also is equally capable of doing the job. It matters more now about fit and about personality. So you want to connect with them. So when you enter the room, don't slink in like a scared dog with a tail between your legs. Walk in confidently. Look around. There might be more than one person in the room. There might be 5 people in the room. Make eye contact with all of them. Shake hands and smile with all of them. Make sure your palm is dry. Rub it on your trousers before you get up to walk in the room.
True.
A sweaty hand is gross.
Yeah.
Some people just can't help it, but still. But looking them in the eye, smiling is important. It's amazing how people are unaware of their like, look at Dave's face right now. See how he's just sitting there like a moron? See, now he's smiling. So you want to be aware of what your face is doing. You want to be you want to be exuberant, you want to be effusive, all these wonderful things, and because you want to connect with them. But
good points, but not overexcited. Oh my God, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me in. Thank you so much. This is really great. What a wonderful office you have. Oh my God, this is so great. Look at this desk. This desk is really cool.
Yeah, don't be a kiss ass or a weirdo either. That's everybody sees through that. You're just trying to connect on a very human level with them.
Yeah. Just be sort of, and it's hard. I mean, especially we're talking our first job. The interviewing, we're going to have our ups and downs. I mean, it's going to be sort of we're going to learn from every interview. I mean, I've had terrible interviews that you go back like, oh my God, why did I say this? Or why did I say that? Or why didn't I? No, it's more like, why didn't I say that? And we're going to talk about that in a second. What else do you have?
In a recent interview, the candidate talked nonstop and didn't give me a chance to break in.
Get out.
This person talked a lot. And actually, when their first kind of time they did that, I even joked about it and said, wow, that was a lot of words all at once that you just said. And then this person laughed, meaning that they should have taken it to be like, oh my God, I'm talking too much.
Right. And they didn't.
No, they didn't.
Yeah.
And they kept doing it throughout the interview. It showed me that they had a fundamental inability to listen.
Yeah. Yep.
They were in full court press sales mode, which is understandable, but I think your nerves are going to want to make you fill the silence. Instead, you're just trying to have a pleasant meeting with people and connect. I would have to say the best interviews that I've had are where it felt not like an interview, but like a meeting. Like
this conversation.
This person already works here. We're just having a meeting about, oh my God, we have this.
Right.
Let's talk strategy for how are we going to finish all this.
I think the two biggest things that I'm looking for when I'm interviewing is the qualities I'm looking for. I want somebody who can listen, so somebody who's not talking all the time, but they can certainly, tell me about themselves when I ask, but can listen. And second, somebody who is responsible. Like those are the two main things that I'm looking for.
Sure.
When I'm interviewing somebody, and not easy to find. One of the things I think this is to me, this is an interview killer. I don't think everybody else will agree with this, but for me personally, it is. And we have in our show notes, we want to interview them. Obviously, we don't want to bombard them with 60 questions, or even ask them questions that we should already know. Like what kind of work do you do? Like we should already know that, right?
Right.
But the big interview killer for me is when we might be nearly done the interview. I'd say, okay, do you have any questions for me? And they sit there and they go, no, I'm good. I'm done. Like as soon as that, because I want somebody who's going to ask me at least something. And I even told this girl, in fact, I actually might have even hired her because she was really good. But I told her, I said, and I think I told her this because I knew I was going to hire her because I did like her. But I said, the next time in an interview somebody asks you if you have any questions for them, please come up with at least one. Like you got to have one. We sort of joke.
Yes. But
you have to just say nothing or say, no, I'm good. Just no.
Well, it also shows that you've given this position thought, So in the show notes with the podcast, we've given you 5 questions as suggestions, and these are great questions to have on hand. Remember, you don't have to memorize them. You could bring it. There's nothing wrong with saying, when they ask you, do you have any questions for me? Pulling out a piece of paper with these 5 questions on it.
Right.
That's totally acceptable. Yes, actually, I've made some notes. The 5 questions that we listed, and you guys, of course, can add to this, but these 5 are my 5 favorite. Number 1, what do you expect me to accomplish in the first 60 to 90 days? It's really about expectation, showing that you're taking this seriously, that you want to fulfill my expectations. It's a great question.
Yep.
Question number 2, what are the common attributes of your top staff, or your top performers, or your best team members? Basically, what are you looking for? And then it's a great question because it's opening you up to then explain how I'm doing those. I do those things. I'm a great time management ninja or whatever.
Right.
Number 3, what are 1 or 2 things that really drive results for you or for this company or for the project? And this is now the interviewer's chance to say, well, actually, we use this tool called this that really helps us manage emails, or we use this, and so you can then speak about your experience with that. Number 4, and this one's a little unusual. What does the rest of the staff do in their spare time? Right? Right. It shows that you're interested in the culture. You're interested in fitting in. That you're looking to make friends. And if they say something like, "Well, actually, we have a kickball league, or we have a softball team, or we do a Thursday night wine and cheese thing in the office," it gets you a chance to see what it's like to work there. It gets it gets them to see that you want to fit in. It's beautiful. Yeah, I like that one. That's a good one. And the 5th and final question: how do you manage your deadlines? How do you manage your clients? It's a very evocative question. It's a very open-ended question, but also shows that you're interested in improving as especially if this is your first job, it means that you're aspiring to be a manager.
Right.
And so you ask one or all five of these questions, and I'm impressed.
Yeah, they're good. I like all of them. I think the what do you expect me to accomplish in the first 60 to 90 days would probably be my favorite. Or what do you expect of me? The kinds of questions I don't like is when somebody says, well, tell me about one of the projects you're working on. That to me is a question that they didn't think about. Like they didn't think enough. That's not a good interview question. And my response is, well, we'll get to that. Like if somebody asked me, I'd be like, well, we'll talk about that at another point. Something like that. It's just not a...
Yeah, don't give them homework in the interview.
Yeah, exactly.
So, which brings up kind of an interesting piece. Not all interviewers are created equal.
Right.
There are good interviewers and there are bad interviewers.
Right.
The person you're meeting might not have hired that many people, or might actually not be good at it. So they've probably Googled how to interview people. So be prepared for what we call the typical interview questions. And in the show notes, we gave links to a series of them. Some typical ones are, why did you leave your last job? Tell me about a time that you failed and how you overcame it. What are your goals in 5 years? I guarantee you in some job interview, one of those questions is probably going to come up. Be prepared with an answer.
Yeah, I agree. I also think, though, that we're generally talking. We're looking for our first job. I think these interviewers hopefully will go sort of maybe a little easier on us. Maybe they won't, because they know they're hiring somebody green. They know they're hiring somebody who's going to be nervous. So they might give us a little more leeway. However, if we can still shine through all of that, then they're going to be like, oh, this is our person, like totally comfortable. They weren't nervous like the other two people we interviewed. They asked us good questions, when I threw it to them. So, yeah.
And when they do ask you questions, you never want to say anything negative
about
anyone.
Never.
Ever. If your last boss, I don't care if he was the guy from Silence of the Lambs, you never say anything negative.
Never.
About anybody, because it reflects badly on you.
Yes.
So if your last boss is crazy and they ask you, why did you leave? You don't say, because my boss is crazy. Well, you say something along the lines of, I was looking for a new opportunity. I felt that I contributed all I could there and I wanted to grow. Something not, my boss is a wacko.
Never negative. And using, I guess, the restaurant thing as an example, I mean, just nothing negative, because the restaurant industry can be crazy, but never say anything negative about anybody, especially a boss, like never, not even as a joke. And that's actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because if somebody says something negative in an interview, even if it's not about somebody else, it's just they might be talking about something. If it's negative, in my mind, that's already a tick mark against them.
Right. Nothing
negative in the first interview at all. Not even the way nothing.
No. But it's also if you made a mistake and you got fired, this is your chance to acknowledge your mistake, right? Or if they ask you a question about something that you did that didn't go right, you don't want to say I'm perfect, or what's your biggest weakness?
Yeah,
don't
but that's not
too detail oriented.
The whole firing thing,
mistakes.
The whole firing thing's not even going to come up anyway. So I wouldn't even worry about that. All right, so. Are we done with nailing the interview? Because we're 59 minutes in here. We still got 3 left.
Okay, yeah. Well, let's. This is a good segue. Is that in the interview you don't bring up money early, but you do want to bring it up at the end, which kind of brings us to part 6, negotiating your salary.
Well, let me ask you this: in the first interview, is it appropriate to bring up money?
I think the interviewer should bring it up. I don't think the applicant should ever bring it up. But I've had people do it in a very tactful way. But you ask, it's how you ask. Don't say, what are you going to pay me?
Right.
Can you just give me an idea of the budgetary range or the salary range for this position?
Right.
Because the truth is, everybody has a range. We're going to pay you between X and Y, and depending on your experience, will determine how much we go into the higher end.
Here's my advice, and you're right, because some of these, especially first job postings, they might not post how much. They might just say, salary commensurate with experience or whatever it is. My personal take on it is, especially we're looking for our first job, I wouldn't bring it up as the person in the interview. I wouldn't bring it up at all. If the interviewer brings it up, then we can discuss it. Because they may want to bring it up because they really like us and they don't need a second interview. They're thinking they're going to hire us now, so they want to talk about the money now, although they're not going to say that. But for us, never ever just don't bring up money in the first interview. That's my own personal take, because it's not about the money. We know that, and it doesn't sit right with me if somebody in the first interview like, well, how much does it pay? Even if it was tactfully done. Because it's really, to me, I think it's just second interview conversation. But that's my own personal take.
Right. And, well, especially if this is your first job in architecture, you're not really in a position.
No, and you're in no position to negotiate, really.
Yeah, if you're interviewing somebody with 30 years experience, and the job only pays for somebody with 5 years experience, then that's where the interviewer is probably going to bring it up. But I will say this: let's say you make it to the interview. Congratulations, right? They might even give you an offer. Now, you wouldn't negotiate salary until they actually offer it to you. Just telling you what the position pays, you shouldn't negotiate at all. You should just nod your head and keep your mouth shut.
Right.
But let's say they say, okay, Mrs. Smith, or Miss Smith, we want to hire you, and they give you a number. Let's say it's $40,000 a year. Immediately, and you and I might disagree on this, but I would say immediately counter offer with 10% more.
Really?
Yes. Here's why. So they say, okay, we'd like to extend you an offer of $40,000 a year. They're lowballing you. It's part of the tactic.
Right.
The worst thing to do would be go, great, okay, I'll take it. Instead, come back and say, I was really hoping for $44,000. How do you feel about that?
Right. That's good. Yeah.
And I guarantee you, only someone foolish would not come back with a counter. And what would probably happen is they say 40, you say 44, and I bet you'd settle on 42. So congratulations, you just got
made
yourself
$2,000. Yeah.
$2,000 raise.
Yeah.
Just because you had the guts to ask.
I agree with that. I mean, that makes sense. And again, it's up to them. I mean, obviously they're bringing it up first, and it could happen. I mean, even as a first job, it goes back to what you're saying earlier. Especially, I think, for first jobs, for the architecture firm, they're sort of, they're less, I guess a job criteria is just less in the sense that, you're right, they're not interviewing 10 people. If it's a higher level project management position, they probably have to interview at least 10 people to find the right person. But entry level job, I think you're right. It's 2 resumes, or they're calling in 2 or 3 people max.
And remember, we're not buying a computer here where we're trying to get the lowest price possible, or a car.
Right.
With human beings, a 10 to 20% spread across what they're asking for salary-wise is expected. And at that point, I don't care. I want the best person for the role, the person I think is going to have the best fit. So it's not like I'm going to take, he was only 40 and he was 42. That's not even going to come into my thinking. Not
even your thinking. No, they just want the right fit, especially at these early stages. So good. All right. So that's 6, negotiating salary. Number 7, follow-ups. What do we got there?
Follow-ups, you want to do it within 3 days. Any more than that, and you've missed your window, because the truth is, they've probably done all their interviews in one day.
Did this just turn into dating advice?
Yeah. Remember, I probably scheduled all the interviews in one day. At the end of the day, I probably already made up my mind.
Right.
So the purpose of your follow-up is to contact them before they contact you.
Right.
So no more than 3 days. Ideally, the next day. At the very least, if you don't want to follow it up, at the very least, the very next day, there should be a thank you letter.
Yes.
Now, email is fine, but it's very easy and lazy to do email. A very impressive thing would be a handwritten card. But keep in mind, if you mail the card, you'd almost have to have it ready to go and mail it as soon as the interview is over, so it comes the next day.
You could do that, though. I mean, you just be like, hey, great to meet you. Thank you for taking the time. Thanks. I like the card, actually. And here's the reason I like the card. And this is the important thing about following up. right? Even if we had a terrible interview, we still want to follow up because we might have felt it was terrible. We might have felt like our hands are clammy. We just did terrible. They could still offer the job. They might not have seen any of that sort of that what we had going on in our own head.
Absolutely.
But here's what's important. And this is not uncommon. They liked us. We're not their first choice. They found somebody they like, but they could come back in 3 months, call us up and say, hey, we have another position opened up. Are you interested? That's not uncommon because they don't want to go through this whole hiring process, right? If they're looking for another sort of junior position, they just interviewed 3 great candidates and they picked one they really liked and they really liked the other 2. So they don't want to go through all that again. So 3 months later, they'll just, oh, Rebecca, we had her in. She was good. Yeah, let's call her up. So yeah, very important.
I would say that is true. I think most people from the recent graduate first time applicant side, they don't know any of that's going on. But the truth is, these are human beings going through resumes, trying to fill a position, trying to find somebody the other staff will like. And so you want to follow up with them. You want to make it easy for them to offer to you. You want to show you're available. And the email or the card should be something simple like, I really enjoyed our talk. I got a lot out of it. Even if I don't get the job, it was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you for your time. Or
thank you for your time. Yeah. Basically, that's what you're showing respect. There shouldn't be no gifts. Don't put a Starbucks gift card in there. No. It seems creepy. Yeah. It seems like a bribe, really. And so you don't want to do any of that either.
Yeah, cool. Which leads into a segue into 8, overcoming objections, which most of the time when we don't get the job, we're not going to hear it. They're not going to call and say, hey, they might. I mean, it's happened. We could, but generally no. You're going to walk out of the interview and never hear from them again.
So we recently went through a round of interviewing for stuff. We received a lot of resumes, narrowed it down to 8 that I talked to by phone, and then 3 in person. Right. So these exact numbers that we're talking about. The no's, I didn't send. I remember I didn't send rejection letters yet to the no's. That's the last thing that I do. I want to make sure that we have somebody for the job first. So I didn't want to reject everybody until I knew we had somebody hired.
Right.
Because we might offer it to somebody and they might have already gotten another job, or we might not agree on salary, or they might have not liked me in the interview. Who knows, right?
Right.
So I could easily kind of go through, I interviewed 3 people in person. One was not a fit. The other 2 were good. Both weren't available. Now I have to go back to the drawing board. So I'm not sending rejections out.
Right.
So don't do this. One of the guys that was a no, he hadn't received his rejection yet. He emailed me through LinkedIn and demanded to know why he hadn't been interviewed.
No way.
He had already kind of worked up in his mind that I guess I didn't get the job. Like the tone of his message was, well, clearly you hated my resume. Ugh. Why didn't I get the job? First of all, it was very combative, very confrontational.
Yeah.
I hadn't even sent a rejection yet. It was all kind of put up in his head. And the funny part is, the irony is that that he was on our maybe list.
Interesting.
So he
took himself off. He
immediately took himself off.
Yeah. And, it's like a numbers game. It's very much like actors trying to get the role in a TV or movie. It's just a numbers game, and there's things happening behind the scenes that we have no control over. There's reasons that firms are making the decisions that just we have no control over. We can't worry about it. We just got to keep going to these interviews, doing the best we can, staying positive, never, ever, ever talking negatively, and eventually we're going to land that job. It will happen because good people will get hired, and frankly, as an employer, there's not as many good people out there as you think. There just isn't. So if you're on it, you're in the minority and you'll get a good job.
You also, people can often be their own worst enemy. With my students, I've seen that. I've sent them job postings and I've encouraged them to apply. And they'll be the ones that'll say, oh, nobody's going to hire little old me.
Right.
I don't have any experience. I don't know. They're asking for Revit. I only know AutoCAD.
Right.
My portfolio is not together. Don't do that.
No.
Put your best face forward. Show how any experience you have applies to this, even if you were a waitress at a whatever, or a stock boy at a hardware store. It doesn't matter. You can find ways to show that you're responsible, that you're a professional, and that you would be a good fit for the company.
Is that music coming from your background, by the way?
Yeah, my daughter. It's a holiday, so my daughter's dancing, and
She like karaoke back there?
I've got 2 doors closed, and you can still hear it. So I apologize.
No worries.
She loves techno.
All right, so let's just recap. So we have number 1 was preparing, right? We want to prepare, do our background research, know who we're sending our info to. Number 2 is the cover letter, which I still think after going through all 8 is the most important, because if we don't get the interview, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 doesn't matter, right? Okay. We got to get in the door. 3 is the resume, which it's very important. Again, I actually still think the cover letter is more important than the resume, because if the cover letter is not good, your resume could be great. It's not going to matter. So number 4, getting the interview. Number 5, nailing the interview. 6, negotiating salary. 7, follow-ups. And 8, overcoming objections. So I think that's a good list there.
Yes, and in the show notes on the website, we will have a list of great links that we found that are very helpful about preparing you for the interview, questions to ask, how to negotiate your salary. And then there's a couple podcasts that I did with our buddy Enoch Sears at the Business of Architecture blog that I think we should link to.
Yes.
That talk about goal setting and succeeding.
And if I was going to say one last thing, it would be great cover letter. The second thing would just be stay positive. Never, ever, ever talk anything negative about anything in an interview. Or if it's raining outside and it's shitty, just tell them about the wonderful cup of coffee you just had or something. Just never nothing negative.
Yeah, nobody wants to hire Debbie Downer.
No. So, alrighty, with that said, I think I'm going to look for our outro here.
Thanks for listening to the ARE Podcast. Be sure to visit architectexamprep.com and check out our other podcast episodes, video tips, and